Hello everybody, welcome to how to build armies for the Wood Elves. First of all, let's go through the main strengths and weaknesses of the army. First of all, the strengths. Obviously, they are experts from a range with a ton of units for skirmishing and raining fire on enemies from a very long way off. They also have a good choice of monsters for a number of situations and very good mobility with high speed on most units. As for the weaknesses, however, they are not the toughest faction in the world, since focus on ranged means a lot of units are a little vulnerable up close. Some of the monsters can also be very slow, which is a lot more noticeable in a more speedy faction. And these slow monsters are also massive targets, so are easily taken out, especially when they get left behind. Now let's get into our early game composition. For this, we have access to tier 0 units. These are spell weavers of shadows, high magic, dark magic, life and beasts, the ancient tree man, and the glade lords, both male and female. As well as this, we have the glade guard. In tier 1, we have access to Eternal Guard, Glade Guard with Hagbane tips, and Dryads. For my early game composition, I'm going to be leading my army with an Ancient Tree Man. They're great fighters right out the gate, and will walk through most enemy front lines up until the mid-game. They're not the best duelists in the world, since they are much better at area of effect attacks, but they will still deal great damage and have a load of HP, so they should be just fine. Later on, they can get their hands on the Law of Life spells, so they'll scale decently into the late game. For the front line, we're going to go with 9 Eternal Guard. They are bog standard frontline spear units that have decent defense and basically no damage. These are much preferable to Dryads for most of the Wood Elf factions, who are way squishier for a minor increase in damage. Just have them hold the line and keep your ranged units safe, whilst fighting alongside the Lord. Speaking of ranged units, going to go with 10 Glade Guard Hagbane tips. If there's ever going to be a faction to have more range than front lines, it's the Wood Elves. Have them rain fire on their enemy and deal the majority of damage in your army. Since they're doing good poison damage, you'll probably want to move them around to get a good angle to avoid firing upon your own units. The strengths of this composition is great range and ranged firepower right out the gate. You've also got a decently tanky front line to keep your ranged units safe, and the Lord will also be able to assist in almost every fight early on. The weaknesses, however, that Lord is also a massive ranged target, so if the enemy has a lot of range, you're going to be in trouble. All the poison damage also means you're in danger of poisoning your own units if you don't get a good angle. And of course, losing all the ranged units in this army normally means you're going to lose the battle, since the Lord can only do so much. Moving on to the mid-game now. For this, we have access to tier 2 units. These are Eternal Guard with shields, Glade Guard with Starfire shards, War Dancers, War Dancer Azrai spears, Glade Captains, Deepwood Scouts with Swift Shiver shards, Waystalkers, Glade Riders, Glade Rider spears, Glade Rider Hagbane tips, Great Eagles, and Spell Singers of life, beasts and shadows. You also have access to tier 3 units. These are Blade Singers, Wildwood Rangers, Wild Riders, Wild Rider Shields, Treekin, Branch Wraiths, and Hawk Riders. My mid-game composition is still going to be led by the Ancient Tree Man. Still going to be a powerhouse, especially if you invest any skill points into their battling line. They should also be getting a few spells online to provide healing to the army. We're also going to pick up a Spell Singer of Shadows. Now we're getting some more magic online, and I'm going with the Law of Shadows, since I do love me the Law of Shadows. You could go life for the full RP and the double healing, but I just like to take some damage. Unfortunately, they aren't fighters whatsoever, so just keep them on the back lines and keep them safe. For the front lines, we're upgrading to 2 War Dancer Azrai Spears and 4 Blade Singers. The Azrai Spears are the top of the line anti-large front lines units. They do great damage, but don't have the best toughness in the world, so you want to advance quickly and take out the enemy as quickly as possible, rather than dragging it out to get yourself more time. Same story for the Blade Singers, but for anti-infantry. They do outstanding damage, as well as having a little bit of resistance. They still have the same problem of not being the toughest units in the world, so take out the enemy as quickly as possible. For the ranged units, we're going with 6 Deepwood Scouts with Swift Shiver shards. These are a massive upgrade to the ranged units. These lads can now fire on the move, and make for great skirmishing units with brilliant damage and a massive range. Keep them moving around the backs of the enemy to get a nice clear shot, and maybe stick them on skirmish if the enemy starts to chase them down. Going to go with 4 Treekin. We're bringing these boys for frontline's tanky presence. Normally with monstrous infantry, we're protecting them with infantry. This time, it's the other way around. They'll still do decent damage whilst they're tanking, and should last a good amount of time. Finally closing us out, we have 2 Hawk Riders. These are some fun flying units that deal great armor piercing range damage, and can do great skirmishing work. They're easy to get around the back of enemies and fire into their backs. If the enemy has any flyers, then you'll probably spend a lot of the battle being chased away, so stick them on skirmish and focus on the rest of your army. The strengths of this composition, you're getting your top of the line's front lines units earlier than most factions. All your ranged units can also skirmish if they have to, so your lines breaking isn't the end of the world. And now you're getting double the magical value, with the spellcaster that will only get stronger and stronger. As for the weaknesses, the Lord of course isn't getting any smaller, and the later the game gets, the more powerful enemy ranged units are going to be sniping him. The front lines are also very damaging, but not the toughest, so you're going to take some hits in most battles. And finally, you don't have a ton of capability for getting into the enemy backlines, so if they rely on ranged, you may start to struggle. And finally, we come to our late game composition. For this, we have access to tier 4 units. These are Weight Watchers, Sisters of the Thorn, and Zoats, and tier 5 units, which are Great Stag Knights, Tree Men, and Forest Dragons. My late game composition, of course, still being led by the Ancient Tree Man. You want to have all their spells online, but aside from that, still be on the front lines and hopefully not get focus fired. That Spell Slinger of Shadows should have all their spells online and get on the Eagle Mount to gain more mobility and some very minor fighting ability. You still want to keep them pretty safe and provide spell support wherever needed on the Eagle Mount. The front lines are remaining the same of 2 Azrai Spears and 4 Blade Singers, but we're upgrading our ranged units to Weight Watchers, which are the top of the line Wood Elf ranged units. These are similar to Deepwood Scouts, just with better range and damage, and a great ability to skirmish. Pretty much do the exact same thing as Deepwoods, they just do it better. We're replacing Treekin with Zoats, who are faster, bigger, and do a buttload more damage. Embed them in your front lines to easily mow through whatever the enemy brings against you. If the front line's doing fine, then these lads can also work as pseudo-cav and get into the enemy back lines to take out any ranged or artillery threats. They can also work as cav hunters since they have brilliant armor piercing and anti-large damage. And finally, closes us out, we have 2 Forest Dragons. We're swapping the Hawk Riders for some dragons for their air superiority. Going to use these guys to take out the enemy back lines, to remove ranged threats to your army, as well as using the breath abilities on any clumps the enemy might bring. Just make sure when sending them in that they can get out, otherwise you'll be losing some very expensive units. As for the strengths of this composition, top of the line ranged units that are going to do a ton of damage in any scenario. You're also getting even more magical value and some of it on a flying mount, so you can have your spells wherever you need them. You also have a great choice of units for engaging the enemy back lines if you need to. As for the weaknesses, you still have that squishier front line, and it's all very expensive if you lose any units. Particularly once you get to the late game, you're going to start to feel a burn in pretty much every single battle. The Lord is also a massive target, so taking out enemy ranged units is a must, otherwise he's going to fall very quickly. Both flyers are also massive targets and can be prone to getting bogged down if left unsupported, so if they get into the backlines, keep an eye on them and don't let them get swamped. Now to close you out and show you this army composition in action, I'll pass you over to live commentary Miles. Take it away. Thank you very much for that, Miles. So, as we can see, of course, going against the Empire, as usual, I've actually split my army into 2 here, so I've got 3 units of my front lines, of course, 2 Blade Singers and some Azrai Spears moving over to cut off this right-hand side passage, and then we're doing the same over on the left-hand side with 3 more units. I've also got 3 units of my Weight Watchers coming into the middle here. They're going to fire into whatever word you want to use, at all of these guys over here in this big old blob, and then my other units are actually going to go and try and loop around the side here, but depending on what this cavalry does, they may have some trouble with that. Of course, I've got 2 units of Zoats also going around the side. I figured I'm not really going to need that much help in the front lines, especially with the Weight Watcher support and my Lord being there, and the magic, so I may as well move them around the side and try and take out their ranged units, but first got to get through their cavalry, and of course doing the exact same thing over here. Now my spellcaster is actually moving around to the back, simply just getting a better position and hopefully either draw some fire away from my front lines or draw some fire away from herself by not being near the front lines. So either or, both of those are very good results for me. Of course, both of the 2 Forest Dragons are moving in towards the back of the enemy lines and then going to take out the Luminax of Hysh as quickly as possible. Right, let's get into this. Some big shots from the Luminax of Hysh coming out onto my front lines. I've got no idea why they're not targeting my Ancient Tree Man Lord. Yep, nope, no idea whatsoever. It's really dumb. They should be doing that, and they could have got some great shots of my Lord and shattered my morale nice and early. Now I've got 2 units of Zoat, well, 1 unit of Zoats is kind of just stood there vibing, but the other unit is engaging with these Demigryph Knights, and we have got a couple of units of Halberds, so they're going to feel the pain from the anti-large damage, but Zoats do a bunch of anti-large damage themselves, and of course they can heal up if they need to, but we should be just fine. Of course, this is quite a threat to my Weight Watchers, so I'm of course going to stick them on skirmish and hope and pray that they manage to get out. By that I mean just do that and right click on those guys. In the backlines here, 2 of my dragons, well, my only 2 dragons are engaging the Luminax of Hysh, and they're going to try and take out as quickly as possible. As you can see, the leadership is plummeting, the health is half, and that'll be retreating nice and steadily. Unfortunately, we do have a unit of Demigryph Knight Halberdiers with the Cascading Fire Cloak on them, so that's not good. That's gonna, that's really gonna hurt those guys. So desperately try and get them out or get them some support as quickly as possible. As for the front lines, it's actually going pretty decently over here. Of course, we're getting hit by a lot of the cav, which is quite painful indeed, but they are holding the line, and with all the support of the Weight Watchers, they should be just fine. Over here, it's a little bit more spread out, but with the Lord in, once again, we should be just fine. Where even is the enemy Lord? I don't actually... Oh, there he is. Yeah, it's a Battle Priest, or an Arch Lector, whatever you want to call it. It's an Arch Lector. I mean, you could just call his name, but I digress. But yeah, the AI doesn't really seem to know how to use them. It just kind of keeps them at the back as support rather than getting them a bit more involved on the front lines. As you can see on the right-hand side here, we have managed to crush 2 units of cavalry, and that final volley from the Way Watchers will secure that second one in running away with minus 43 leadership. That is that's not good. And the Zotes will finish off that final unit there. Now we have a cast of the... I can never remember what this spell's called. The big one from the Law of Shadows. It does the big, and it does the damage, and it's good, and it did damage to all these range units, so I'm very happy with it. My Zotes have finally managed to get around the back of these, well, my front lines, and also their front lines, and are charging into the great swords, and also into the back lines, again, using them as pseudo-cav, because, you know, why not? Got a couple of units of Way Watchers, picking out key targets on the enemy back lines, and also trying to help my front lines out over on this right-hand side here. My other 3 units of Way Watchers are now moving back into position, despite getting walked through by some Daring Knight Halberdiers. That does not feel too good. I've of course got my Zotes moving in there, going to focus on to this Gunderman's Surefire's handgunners and take them out as quickly as possible, so I don't have to worry about any other ranged units. And I have managed to get one of my Dragons out, I believe. Did I get them both out? Yeah, I got them both out. One of them just took a few hits. And another Lunar of High Shot going onto infantry. Wow, the AI really does not know how to use those, but you know, when you're playing campaign, you're going to be playing against the AI, and these guides for campaign, so I'm not going to complain too much. As you can see, we're pretty much just cleaning up. A lot of the enemy line has shad. The only things that are really at full HP now is the... where's the Lord? I don't keep losing the goddamn enemy Lord. Oh, there he is on the front lines. Yeah, he's pretty much full HP, as is the Spellcaster. But there's really nothing to worry about here. We're just pretty much cleaning up and waiting for that army losses, which is coming right about now. Any minute now. Here he comes. Just get ready. It's coming. I promise you. There we go. Told you. I was dead on time. It's almost like I've played this battle before. Of course, the only thing left is the Caribou Greatswords, and as we're taking them out, we're going to... Oh, that's a lot of friendly fire. Sorry, lads. Oh, boy, that does not feel good. I mean, it also doesn't feel good for them, but it really does not feel good for us. Oh, yep, you can see we're... Oh, no, she's all right. I thought she was getting hit. No, she's just doing some cool backflips. So things I could have done better in this battle. I definitely think I need to use spells a lot more. Not going to lie. Kind of forgot that Zotes had those spells. So right up until the end there, I was like, oh, they have spells. Yeah, I should probably try and get some healing out. And I did do like a small heal on these units over here. But if you're like me and you're kind of a bit brain dead like that, once you get to the end of your battle, what you can do is just have all your units line up, use those healing spells, and get a lot of replenishment done before you even get out of the battle, which is a nice cheesy way. The Vampire Cants do it best, but the Law of Life also does it pretty good. So that'd be a great thing to do. I also should have used my Zotes over here a bit better. Focus down that cavalry and then move them back into the enemy backlines. Same with the ones over here. They did end up stood around for a little bit. The Dragons, not too bad use, I think. They just probably got bogged down a little bit too much. So let's have a look at the stats. First up, the Ancient Tree Man was on the front lines going against Great Swords, and I didn't use his spells that well because Law of Life compared to the Law of Shadows, for some reason in this battle I felt like I really didn't have that many Winds of Magic, despite I believe using a Arcane Conduit. Might have to fact check that one, not sure I did. But anyway, if I did use it, either way, I didn't feel like I had much Winds of Magic to go around, so I didn't really get that many casts off. I was going to see, even on the spellcast hit, we got that one big cast off, but it only did 810 damage value, and that's mostly because it was on range units, so it was a little bit cheaper, but it did take them out, which is the most important thing. I don't really care about the damage value in this sense, because the game doesn't really take into account the damage value of the ammo of the unit and the potential damage that it could have done to me. Moving on to the front lines, this is going to be fairly similar at 3 rounds, so 613, 864, 814, 12,166 there, very nice, 899 and 1,054. So these guys were fighting, depending on what side you're on, a variety of units. A lot of them fighting great swords, some of them fighting cav. I would guess that the 1200 one was fighting cav, and that's where that high damage value has come from. But overall, they took quite a lot of damage, these 2 or 3 units here. But overall, that is really not too bad. I'd be pretty happy with that. It's a couple of turns of casualty replenishment, yeah, but you're not having to replace units, which I'm very happy about. Of course, getting to the ranged units now, a bullet of damage value here, 1,300, 1,000, 1,300 again, 1,500, 1,200, and nearly 2,000. Way Watchers, man, they are so damn good. You can just stick them on skirmish, right-click them at the enemy, and you'll probably do alright. They are just so crazy OP with the amount of range damage they do, their speed, their stealth, their damage. It's all fantastic, and they can shoot you from across the map, and there's nothing you can really do to stop them. If they get bogged down, like if those cavalry managed to get into them a little bit more, we would have been in some trouble. But because I had 3 units, well, because I had 6 units, 3 on each side, I could split them apart and have the cav focus the one, and then the other 2 focus on the cav, and that took them out nice and quickly. We didn't lose that many units, turn or 2 of replenishment, and they'd be right as rain. Onto the Zoats here with 1200, and then 987, and then 1100, and then another 1200. Again, they're fighting against Cav, so even though they ain't got the most kills in the world, that damage value is very good. And then after they have finished with that Cav, you can get into the back lines, take out that ranged, take out those ranged units. If you're fighting against an enemy, there is a lot more ranged focus, like the Skaven. Of course, fighting against Skaven is never fun, but with the Zoats, they can get in, use some of those buffs on themselves to keep themselves alive until they get in, take out the ranged units, and then loop them back around into the front lines, and they'll do really well. The only thing that Zoats can't really handle is being completely bogged down with no support whatsoever versus a lot of anti-large damage. That would be pretty cringe for them, but as long as you don't do that, Zoats are a fantastic pick. And finally, our two Forest Dragons. Not the most kills in either of them, but nearly 1200 damage value there and 1800 damage value. Of course, they were both going against the Illuminarchs of Hysh. In fact, they went for the Regiment of Renown Illuminarch of Hysh, the Tempelhof I wish I could read, folks. I really do. The Tempelhof Illuminarch, that's what they were going against. And that is a ton of damage value just for taking out that one unit. And that's really what you want them to be doing. Dragons aren't really the best at taking out... Well, they're alright taking out infantry. But if you can get them one-on-one on something like this, they do alright versus Hellstorms, but on Illuminarchs of Hysh, that focus damage, super high arm piercing, they go down really, really quick. You just got to make sure they don't get bogged down. One of them did, but again, a couple of Law of Life spells, turn or two replenishment, and be right as rain. And of course, keep them out to use that breath ability whenever you can, and they'll get just a few odd kills and a ton of damage value there. So yes, that about wraps up everything I have to say on how to build the Wood Elf armies. Let me know if you enjoyed the video by leaving it a like. Of course, you can't leave a dislike anymore because, you know, YouTube doesn't really care about your opinion, but I do. I can see the dislike. So if you didn't like this video and don't agree with my compositions, then do leave a dislike and I'll be sure to take a look at that. If you've got any other questions about how to play the Wood Elves, either in battle or campaign, then be sure to leave them down in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to help you out. Also, be sure to check out COLONELDAMNEDERS.store. I've got the brand new Christmas sweater merch. It's only on sale until the end of the year, so be sure to grab one while it lasts. And while you're there, be sure to use code FESTAG2021 to get 10% off store-wide on every single thing, not just the new Christmas jumpers, but it does include the new Christmas jumpers, so definitely check those out. Also, if you want to support the channel in a very direct way, then consider becoming a member on YouTube, a Patreon on Patreon, or a subscriber on Twitch. Doing so directly supports the channel and it gets you all sorts of shout-outs, such as ItchBoyLC and Henry Tucker for their support at the Unclean Ones tier. Really can't thank you guys enough. Thank you to all supporters, and one more thank you all for watching, and for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.